Have you ever had one of those moments that completely changes how you see someone? I'm about to tell you about an experience that turned my entire world upside down. It happened during my junior year of college, in the organic chemistry lab where I spent most of my afternoons. The science building was this old brick structure with modern labs inside, all gleaming countertops and state-of-the-art equipment. The prep room was this small space off the main lab where we stored chemicals and specialized equipment. It had this distinct smell, a mixture of acetone, alcohol, and that indefinable laboratory scent that clings to your clothes. That's where I met Jake. He was assigned as my lab partner at the beginning of the semester, tall, with dark hair that always fell across his forehead, and this infectious laugh that made even the most tedious titrations bearable. Jake was the kind of guy everyone liked, captain of the swim team, straight-A student, and genuinely nice to everyone. We developed a good rhythm over the semester, dividing tasks efficiently and helping each other through complex procedures. I'd always thought he was attractive, objectively speaking, of course, but I never imagined he'd see me as anything more than a friend and lab partner. Jake had mentioned girlfriends in passing, and I'd filed him firmly in the straight and unattainable category of my mind. Still, we had chemistry, the academic kind, definitely, but maybe something else too. There were moments when our hands would brush as we reached for the same beaker, or when he'd lean close to check my calculations, and I'd feel this electric current run through me. I dismissed these feelings, convinced they were one-sided and potentially friendship-ruining if acknowledged. Let me take you to that particular Tuesday afternoon that changed everything. Our professor had assigned us a complex synthesis reaction that required careful monitoring over several hours. The lab was busy that day, with teams working at every station, the air filled with the soft hum of conversation and the occasional clink of glassware. Jake and I had claimed our usual spot near the windows, where natural light supplemented the fluorescence overhead. The experiment we were working on involved creating an ester, specifically banana oil or isopenyl acetate, through a reaction between acetic acid and isopenyl alcohol. It required precise measurements, careful temperature control, and constant monitoring. The process was delicate, with multiple steps including refluxing, washing, and distillation. We needed to work in close proximity, passing instruments back and forth, checking each other's work, and maintaining a steady conversation about what came next. As the afternoon progressed, I noticed Jake acting differently. He seemed more attentive, standing closer than necessary, finding reasons to touch my shoulder or hand. At first, I thought I was imagining things, projecting my own wishes onto innocent gestures. But then came the moment that confirmed something was definitely different. We needed specialized glassware for the next step of our experiment, a specific type of condenser that was kept in the prep room. Jake volunteered to get it, asking me to come along to help carry everything. The prep room was small, maybe 10 by 12 feet, lined with shelves of chemicals and equipment. It was separated from the main lab by a heavy door with a small window, a safety feature in case of chemical spills or fires. As we entered, Jake moved behind me to reach for something on a high shelf. I could feel the warmth of him just inches away, and my heart started racing in that betraying way it had lately whenever he was near. We gathered what we needed, and as I turned to leave, I heard the distinctive click of the door lock. I turned back, confused, to find Jake leaning against the door, a mischievous smile playing on his lips. "What are you doing?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady despite the sudden flutter in my stomach. "I thought maybe we should test our chemistry," he said, his voice lower than usual. "The non-academic kind." I stood there, frozen, wondering if this was some kind of joke. Jake had never given any indication that he might be interested in me romantically. Had I misread him completely? Was this some kind of cruel prank? But the look in his eyes seemed genuine, nervous even, as if he was taking a huge risk. "I thought you were straight," I managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. Jake shrugged, taking a step toward me. "I thought so too, until I met you. Labels are complicated, you know? All I know is that I can't stop thinking about you, and I'm tired of pretending otherwise." Let me explain why this moment was so disorienting. When you've spent months, years, even convincing yourself that someone is completely unattainable, having them suddenly within reach is terrifying. It's like training yourself to ignore gravity, only to have someone tell you that, actually, you can fly if you want to. The possibility is both exhilarating and absolutely terrifying. My mind was racing, trying to process this new information while simultaneously being acutely aware of how close Jake was standing. The way his eyes kept dropping to my lips, the fact that we were alone in this small room with no one to interrupt us. The air between us seemed charged with potential energy, like the moments before a chemical reaction begins. "You locked us in here to tell me that?" I asked, trying to sound more composed than I felt. Jake laughed, that same laugh that had made me look forward to lab days more than I cared to admit. "Well, I figured if it went badly, at least you couldn't run away immediately. And if it went well." He trailed off, leaving the implication hanging in the air between us. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here we were, surrounded by instruments designed to measure and quantify, and yet there was nothing scientific about the way my heart was pounding or the electricity I felt in every place our bodies almost touched. Chemistry was supposed to be predictable, governed by laws and formulas, but there was nothing predictable about this moment. "How long have you been feeling this way?" I asked, needing to understand how I could have missed the signs. "Since that day you explained resonance structures to me," he said without hesitation. "You were so passionate about it, drawing electron movements in the air with your hands, and I couldn't look away from you. I kept finding excuses to ask for your help on things I already understood, just to see that look on your face when you're explaining something you care about." I remembered that day, 3 months earlier. I'd been so focused on making sure he understood the concept that I hadn't noticed anything unusual in his attention. How many other moments had I misinterpreted? How many times had he been trying to tell me something with his actions that I'd been too cautious to see? As we stood there in the prep room, our actual experiment neglected in the main lab, Jake took another step toward me. "We work well together," he said softly. "We balance each other out. You're methodical and careful, and I'm more intuitive. Together, we get better results than either of us would alone." He was right about that. Our lab reports consistently received the highest grades in the class because we complemented each other's approaches to problem solving. Was it possible that this compatibility extended beyond academics? "What about your girlfriends?" I asked, still looking for reasons to protect myself from hoping too much. "There was only one, freshman year," Jake admitted. "I've just let people assume there were others because, well, it was easier than explaining that I was confused about what I wanted, who I wanted." As he spoke, Jake reached out slowly and took my hand, his thumb tracing circles on my palm in a way that made it difficult to concentrate on his words. The simple touch sent sparks through my nervous system, a physiological response that no amount of rational thought could suppress. "The thing about chemistry," Jake continued, his voice taking on that passionate tone he used when discussing scientific concepts he found fascinating, "is that it's all about attraction and repulsion. About the ways atoms and molecules interact, how they form bonds or break them. Sometimes, the most stable compounds are the ones that surprise us, elements we never expected to see together." I couldn't help but smile at his scientific metaphor. It was so perfectly Jake, finding ways to explain emotional concepts through the lens of the discipline we both loved. And he wasn't wrong. Chemistry was about unexpected connections, about discovering that certain elements had affinities for each other that couldn't be predicted simply by looking at them separately. "So what are you saying?" I asked, needing him to be completely clear. "That you and I have chemical potential?" Jake's smile widened. "I'm saying that I think we could be a stable compound. That maybe we should run some experiments to test the hypothesis." In that moment, the air between us seemed to shimmer with possibility. I was acutely aware of everything: the soft hum of the ventilation system, the distant sounds of our classmates in the main lab, the slight scent of the banana oil we'd been synthesizing clinging to our lab coats. Most of all, I was aware of Jake, how his eyes never left mine, how his breathing had quickened slightly, how he was waiting for me to respond. I'd spent so long convincing myself that this could never happen that now, faced with the reality that it could, I felt almost paralyzed by the potential for both joy and heartbreak. What if this was just experimentation for him? What if he decided, after testing this chemistry between us, that it wasn't what he wanted after all? But then again, isn't that what science is all about? Forming a hypothesis, testing it, and being open to whatever results emerge? The scientific method doesn't fear negative results. It embraces them as valuable data. Perhaps I needed to approach this with the same openness to discovery. I think, I said slowly, finding my courage, that your hypothesis warrants investigation. The relief and happiness that spread across Jake's face was worth every moment of uncertainty. He moved closer, one hand still holding mine, the other coming up to gently touch my cheek. I was hoping you'd say that, he murmured. Just as he leaned in, the moment suspended in perfect anticipation, there was a sharp knock on the prep room door that made us both jump. Hey, is someone in there? We need access to the prep room. It was our lab instructor, her voice muffled through the door, but unmistakably annoyed. Jake and I looked at each other, a moment of shared panic quickly dissolving into stifled laughter. The timing couldn't have been worse. Or perhaps it was perfect, preventing us from rushing into something in the emotionally charged atmosphere of our unexpected confessions. Just a second, Jake called out, then turned back to me with a rueful smile. To be continued, he asked softly. I nodded, suddenly shy but unable to stop smiling. Definitely. Jake unlocked the door, and we emerged with our arms full of glassware, offering apologies and explanations about needing specific equipment for our experiment. Our instructor gave us a suspicious look, but seemed to accept our excuse. As we returned to our workstation, I was hyper-aware of every glance, every accidental touch, every shared smile that now carried new meaning. We managed to complete our experiment successfully, though I doubt either of us could have explained the procedure afterward. My mind was elsewhere, replaying our conversation in the prep room, wondering what would happen when we were alone again. The tension between us had transformed from something uncertain and anxious to something electric and full of anticipation. After we cleaned our station and submitted our preliminary results, Jake walked me back to my dorm. The campus was quiet in the early evening, the setting sun casting long shadows across the quad. We walked close enough that our hands brushed occasionally, each contact sending that same thrill through me. So, Jake said as we approached my building, about that chemistry we were discussing. I turned to face him, finding confidence in the open affection I could now see in his expression. I think we need more data points before drawing any conclusions. Jake laughed, the sound warming me more than the last rays of sunlight. That's very scientifically rigorous of you. What kind of experimental design did you have in mind? Well, I said, feeling bold. I think we should start with dinner tomorrow night. Off campus, not as lab partners. As a date. Jake clarified, his smile growing. Exactly. We need to observe our interactions in multiple environments to establish a pattern. Jake stepped closer, his hand finding mine with newfound certainty. I like the way you think. And after dinner? What then? Science is patient. I reminded him, though patience was the last thing I was feeling. We collect data methodically, one step at a time. Fair enough, Jake conceded, though the look in his eyes suggested he was as eager as I was to accelerate our research. But I have one more hypothesis I'd like to test tonight, if you're willing. Before I could ask what he meant, he leaned in and kissed me, softly at first, then with growing confidence as I responded. It was nothing like the chemical reactions we studied in lab. It was organic in the most non-scientific sense, unpredictable and perfect in its spontaneity. When we finally pulled apart, both slightly breathless, Jake rested his forehead against mine. Initial results seemed promising, he murmured. I laughed, feeling lighter than I had in months. I think we need to repeat the experiment to ensure consistency. I couldn't agree more, Jake said, and kissed me again. In the weeks that followed, Jake and I continued our research into the chemistry between us. We kept working together in lab, our academic partnership strengthened rather than complicated by our developing relationship. There were adjustments, of course, moments of uncertainty as Jake navigated his evolving understanding of his sexuality, conversations about what we wanted and where we were heading. But through it all, we maintained that balance he had identified, my methodical approach complementing his intuitive one, creating something stronger and more beautiful than either of us could have achieved alone. Looking back now, I'm grateful for Jake's courage that day in the prep room. It would have been easier for him to maintain the status quo, to keep his feelings hidden rather than risk rejection. Instead, he created an opportunity for us to discover something neither of us had anticipated, a reaction that, once catalyzed, transformed both of us. Chemistry, both in the lab and in relationships, is about transformation. It's about elements coming together to create something new, something that couldn't exist without that precise combination. It's about the courage to mix compounds that might not seem compatible at first glance, to see what happens when they interact. Sometimes, the most important scientific discoveries come not from following the established protocol, but from taking risks, from being open to unexpected results. Jake and I were an unexpected result, a compound that no one, including ourselves, would have predicted. But sometimes, those unexpected compounds turn out to be the most stable, the most valuable, the most worth pursuing. So if you find yourself locked in a prep room with someone who wants to test your chemistry, maybe consider running the experiment. You never know what kind of remarkable reaction you might discover. Total _char_count, 17,324.